Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to Cloud-Powered Web Apps in Minutes with Windows Azure Mobile Services. I'm Chris Reisner, and over here I've got Brady Gaster with me. We're going to start and just tell you a little bit about who we are.
Cool. Let me go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm Brady Gaster. I'm a father of two, a musician, web developer, Azure technical evangelist, and this is Chris Reisner.
I don't have any kids, so I just had to put husband to one up there. But in my spare time, I like to go sailing. I'm a mobile developer primarily, a lot of iOS, a lot of Android stuff. And I'm a Windows Azure evangelist for Windows Azure as well. Mm-hmm. All right, why don't we go ahead and get started then. Cool. So today we're going to talk about a number of different things. First, going to give you an introduction to what mobile services is and what it can do for you. And then we're going to talk about using it for two different things. Building a pure kind of HTML5, so HTML and JavaScript application, and then also using it to build a ASP.NET MVC C# application. And then we're going to wrap things up by showing you how you can secure your mobile service application, or your applications using mobile services. We should have ample time for questions at the end, so please save them till then because we'll possibly answer your question along the way.
And when you ask a question, please use the mic.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so Windows Azure Mobile Services is what's called a backend as a service. And the idea was certainly, because as you can tell by the name, that it would be used to backend mobile applications. But one of the great things about it is it gives you a lot of capabilities that you can use from web applications as well. So with mobile services, you get stuff like structured data storage powered by SQL database, user and data authentication, server-side logic, scaling like anything else that's in the cloud, logging and diagnostics, and then there's also push notifications for when you actually make mobile apps. But there's actually a solution we'll talk about for doing kind of push notification style communication down to your web apps as well. So first thing we're going to do is get started by showing you a simple application that is in HTML5 and uses mobile services. So here I am in the mobile server, or the Windows Azure portal, and I've got all the stuff that you can do in Windows Azure over here on the left side. Today we're going to look at mobile services and maybe one other thing. So we'll go in and create a new mobile service. Really easy. You pick compute, mobile service, and then create. We're just going to name this one TechEd. What is it? Thursday? We'll just name it TechEd Thursday. All right, so that's fine. Now I can choose to either use an existing database or a new one, so I'm going to go ahead and pick a new one.
He's obviously jet-lagged, by the way.
I think I know what day it is. And for the region, I'm just going to choose to put this in the West US region. So next, I can choose what my database name is. I'm just going to use the default, and then I can choose a server, and I'm just going to use an existing one. But if I wanted to, I could go down here and create a new server as well. So once I choose my existing one, I enter my credentials. And provided I enter them correctly, it's going to go ahead and create that. Now, mobile services is built off of Node.js, and it actually runs using Windows Azure websites. And it does this because Windows Azure websites supports Node.js websites. Windows Azure websites, in turn, is actually built off of cloud services. So when you end up spinning up your mobile service, it's actually doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes because it has to get that website going with the Node.js runtime, and it has to get the cloud service that supports that, in addition to the database it's carrying behind the scenes. So this takes anywhere from 20 to 40 seconds to actually spin up, and then we should have it ready to go. But it's taking a few more seconds than I'd like, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip over to, oh, there it goes. Perfect. So I'll go into that one. The first screen we get here is the Quick Start screen, where you can choose which platform you want to start with. Now, I'm going to download an HTML and JavaScript application right now, but I could go back tomorrow, and if I wanted to build a Windows Store app with the same mobile service, very easy. You just switch back over here, and you're good to go. You can use the same mobile service to back many applications. So once I go into HTML JavaScript, I can choose to either connecting an existing HTML app, which will walk me through the steps of getting the JavaScript library and adding it to my website, or I can create a new HTML app. So that's what I'm going to do today, because each of these platforms has a templated application, which is a to-do list that you can download to kind of see how to get started with mobile services. So the first step is to say I want to create a to-do item table. And the reason you have to do this is that whenever you tell your mobile service you want to create a table, it actually spins up a REST API around that table for you. So now that we've done that, we'll go ahead and download the application.
And as you can see, he's a Mac, I'm a PC. We're getting along well.
It does happen.
It does happen.
All right, so I've downloaded that application, and I can see it's right here. I've got a couple different files there that we'll get into in a second. Before I can actually run it, though, because as he said, I'm a Mac, I've got to actually change the permissions on that directory so it'll be able to run in my local web server. So I've done that. So now if I open it up, you can see, like I said, simple to-do list. I'm going to be able to add items. Right now it's trying to pull those items from the server. So there's no items right now. So I'll just say we're gonna fly to New Orleans. And Brady, I think we need to eat some crawdads while we're here, right?
Yeah, totally.
And we're definitely going to talk about the web. So I've got my items there, and if I go back to the mobile service here, I go up to my data tab, and I look at my to-do items table. At no point did I say what data I'm going to send to my mobile service or what I'm going to save. It actually uses something called dynamic schematization to inspect the data that's coming over and create columns off that. So basically, I sent over a text column, and it said, this looks like a string, so I'll create a varchar column. Cool. And I sent over a complete column, and it said, oh, this looks like a Boolean. I'm going to create a bit column for you.
Could I just add arbitrary stuff to that if I wanted to?
Let's take a look. So what I'm going to do now is we'll actually look at some of the code for that. So I'll just go ahead and open that up here. Now, styles.css, it's obviously the style sheets. Nothing too crazy here. My index.html, the two big important things here are kind of my form, which I actually use to create new items, and then this unordered list, which is how I actually display those items. Now, if I go over to the app.js, this is where I'm kind of doing everything important. We'll walk through everything in a second, but first, to Brady's question, what if I just want to add a new column? So right here, this is where I'm inserting my data. So I'll just add a Brady's column, and we'll say is awesome. So now I'm going to save this, and I'll go back to my website, and I'm just going to refresh. So let's see, test out the new column. So if we go back to our data now and we refresh, we should see that we have another column here. Brady's column's there, and it's awesome. So yeah, it's as simple as that. You add new data types, and dynamic schematization will add that for you.
Cool.
Yeah. And it's actually something you can turn off as well. So if you wanted to turn it off, you go back over to the configure tab right here, and you just switch them on and off, just like that.
And you probably want to do that once you were going to go to production or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So you probably don't want to add new columns unexpectedly when you're in production, so you can turn it off, and then you don't risk sending new data that you don't expect to. So now if you return back to our code, the first thing we do in this JavaScript is we initialize a Windows Azure mobile service client. We do that by passing in the URL of our mobile service and this string of characters, which is called the application key. If I go back to my mobile service and I go to the dashboard, we see that we have the URL right here for the mobile service that I created. And then I've got this manage keys thing. What manage keys has, it has an application key and a master key. And when I initialize my mobile service client with that application key, it essentially means it's going to send that key over for each request as a header. So after that, I've got my to-do item table, which I just create using the name of my table. When it comes time to refresh pull the items down, I create a query using the to-do item table's where method. And this is basically how I specify what my filter is going to be. So here I'm using actually JSON. Behind the scenes, it's actually going to convert that over to a OData filter. And then on the server side, it then converts that to SQL. So down here, then I use that query to read my data. And then after that, I basically loop through that data, and I create a new list of items for each of my to-do items. And then at the end, I actually put it into the to-do items spot, the unordered list in my HTML. So we already looked at add item, but really quickly, we call the insert method on the to-do item table, and then we pass in our data using, again, JSON. All the data with mobile services behind the scenes works as JSON. So since I'm doing JavaScript, it's very easy for me to just create JSON data there. Updating the data, if I were to change the text or if I were to mark an item complete, is done really simply by pulling out the item ID and then setting the new complete value. Deleting item is as simple as just pulling out the ID. Then at the end of the JavaScript, we just call that refresh to-do items to actually show everything. Look good?
Yep, looks good to me.
All right. Let's go ahead and head back to the slides.
Okay.
All right. So what we've got right now is we've got an HTML5 site that's talking to mobile services, that's talking to my database. But I think we can get a little bit better than that. What I'd really like to do is actually push this out to Windows Azure websites. Because I've already got a mobile service, it's going to be really easy for me to have a website, right? Mm-hmm. So let's go ahead and do that now.
Cool.
So we're back in the portal. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go up to websites. And I've already created a website for my TechEd demo right here. So I've also already created a GitHub repository, which I'm going to use for that website. It's going to load momentarily. So I've got my GitHub URL right here. All I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into my website in my terminal. I'm going to initialize a local Git repository. I'm going to add a remote to that. And I'm going to use that same URL I just pulled out of my website right here. So I've done that. I can see that I've, oops. Let me re-add that. Sorry, wrong command. All right, so now I see that all these files are new. They haven't been pushed out yet. So I'll go ahead and add them. I'm going to push them to my Git repository that's hosted in Azure.
You want to commit first?
Good idea. I should probably commit. It won't really work otherwise, Brady.
I feel kind of like Vanna White up here.
All right, so now that I'm pushing this out, the files are going to go up to Windows Azure. In just a minute, we're going to see that, because this is going to update in real time and say it's doing a deployment. Oh, my current branch is behind. Sorry, let me switch over to a different one. I apologize, guys. I'll just create a new one, actually, so this should be relatively quick.
That's the nice thing about websites and mobile services, is that you can go out and you can just create another one really quickly. Anybody out there use websites or mobile services yet? Cool. So you know that we can go ahead and spin up a new website right away once Chris pushes HTML code to it. If for whatever reason we start to notice that we're having a lot of traffic, we could scale that out just like you can with a mobile service. You can just push the code up using Git, TFS, or anything like that. Now I was going to create a new Git repository. We'll probably go through those same commands again. You might want to delete your Git repo. Or
Exactly
your Git
right. Yep.
I think it was the dead mouse we were listening to earlier. Probably got us a little too excited. You can see dead mouse is hanging out up here on the monitor. Stick figure. You can come up later and see him. They had some tie wraps, so we got creative.
All right, so now it's going to ask me for my password now that I've actually, done things correctly. And slowly but surely it will actually push out. All right, so it's writing the files now, and then if we go back up here, now we can see that it's updating, it's showing that it's deploying, and momentarily we're going to see that it's actually going to say it's deployed.
Going.
It'll get there. All right, great, so it's deployed. So now we should be able to browse to our site, and we should be able to see our to-do list.
Nice.
But Brady, it's not loading.
Why not?
Well, the reason it's not loading is because with mobile services, it's using a JavaScript file that's hosted with my mobile service. Now, in order for that JavaScript file to be running in my Windows Azure website and then talking to mobile services, there's some security issues around that won't work. That just won't work like that. Fortunately, there's something called CORS, or cross-origin resource sharing, that allows me to fix that. So all I need to do is take the URL of my site, go back to my mobile service over here, go to the configure area, and then down here underneath that dynamic schema thing we looked at earlier, there's a spot for cross-origin resource sharing. Now, localhost is there by default, which is why I was able to run the site locally. So in order for me to be able to run it from my Windows Azure website, all I need to do is add that URL in here and save it. And now if I go back here and I refresh, it's going to momentarily pull down that data.
Okay.
There we go. And now so let's just go ahead and, well, clearly we flew to New Orleans. We're going to get rid of this one. And, well, we're talking about the web, so we'll just say it's done.
It's a done task.
Yeah, it's done. So now if I refresh here on the my website that's running on websites, and I go back to my local host and I refresh, it's all the same data because it's using the same mobile service behind the scenes.
So if I had a Windows 8 app or a Windows Phone app or an iOS app or an Android app, and I was to install this version of the app using one of those other zip files, it would basically show up on those as well?
Exactly right. The data is going to be the same across all your devices, all your applications accessing your mobile service.
Because it's all the same backend.
Exactly. Nice. Let's go ahead and head back to the slides. So what we just used was the mobile services REST APIs, which again are generated whenever we create a table. And essentially, these REST APIs, they can be used by anything. So if there isn't an SDK for the client you're working on, all you have to do is make a web request, and you're talking to that REST API. And these are pretty simple requests: post, get, patch, delete, all in pretty standard formats for whatever tables you create in mobile services. Now to reinforce that, I'm going to show you how to talk to the REST API using a really cool tool called Postman. And I'm going to use that because for the next set of demos that we're going to do, I'm going to have a status table, but I don't want to create a UI to put data in that table. So instead, I'm going to use this Postman tool to put all my data in it for me. Let's go ahead and switch over. So first thing I'm going to do is go over to the mobile service that we're going to be using from now on. I'm going to go up to the Data tab. And I've already got a few tables, but I'm going to add a status table. And when I add this table, you'll see that I also have an option to set permissions for each of the operations against the table. The default is anybody with the application key, which just means that the application key that we looked at earlier has to come across in the header. If it's not there, I can't make it through to the mobile service. It won't do anything. It won't insert my data. There's a few other operations we're going to look at later on as far as authenticating and controlling how to access that data. For now, we'll just create our table, though. Now that my table's created, I'm going to hop over here to this tool, like I said, called Postman. And Postman is basically a tool for communicating with REST APIs, or really kind of almost any web endpoint. So first thing I do is up here I specify where the endpoint I'm going to hit. So I've got the URL of my mobile service, /tables, and then the status table I just created. Then down here I'm specifying the content type is application JSON. Last thing I've got down here is I'm specifying that I'm going to send JSON over, and then this is the actual JSON. So I'm going to go ahead and send that now. And what did I get? I got a 401 unauthorized. And the reason I did that is because I'm not sending over the application key. So we can fix that really quickly. Go back to the dashboard for my service, go to Manage Keys, and I'm going to copy this data over. Now, if I go in here and I say x-zumo-application, and I paste in that value, now I'm going to get back a good response. So it shows me that my text open was inserted, and it comes back with the ID 1. So I'm going to add a few more items right now, just so we have a few statuses to work with.
Just so you guys know, the word Zumo is not just some made-up word. That was actually the code name for mobile services when it was under development. Now it's called mobile services, but sometimes we'll slip back and forth and call it Zumo just out of habit because we knew it as Zumo while it was being built. So.
Absolutely right. So now that I've sent all my data in, if we go back to the mobile service and I go to my data tab, and I go to the status, we'll see that, again, thanks to dynamic schematization, it looked at it and said, you're sending in text, and it created all this data for me just by using the REST API from a tool that just communicates with REST.
Nice.
So like I said, anything that can communicate with a web endpoint can make the calls to your mobile service.
Nice.
Let's go back to the slides. Cool. So I don't know if you saw the name of that mobile service. It was actually TechEd Kanban. But for the rest of the demos, what we're kind of going to be working on is a Kanban-style task list. If you're not familiar with Kanban, it's kind of a product of the Agile methodology, where you have basically a big board where you can see all the statuses and all your tasks and kind of get a big picture view of what the project's going to be. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to build is two things. An HTML5 site, which is our developer portal, and an ASP.NET site that's our administrator portal. The developer portal is going to be able to show you the tasks. You're going to have the ability to update the tasks. And then at the end, we're going to add authentication so that each user only sees their own tasks. The administrator portal, on the other hand, is going to give the administrator the ability to create their tasks, assign tasks, and then kind of get a big view of where everything is at.
So the admin is kind of what your manager would use, your Scrum Master, and you just give out tasks.
Exactly.
Cool. Nice.
Absolutely.
Makes sense.
So why don't we let Brady go ahead and show us the admin portal?
Sounds good. So what I've got here is a Visual Studio solution. It's an ASP.NET MVC4 solution. And you'll see that I have two projects in here. One, I've got a core project, and the other one, I've got a web project. That core project is really a class library. I'm going to go ahead and drill into that right now. And one thing I want to talk about before I drill into this is that this is actually what's called a portable class library. Have you guys heard that term thrown around this week at all? A PCL? My pet name for it is a pickle, so I'm just going to call it a pickle.
Is that a technical term, Brady?
Of course not.
Pickle? Oh.
Of course not. I think I made it up. So far, nobody's claimed it, so it's mine. Okay. So I've got this pickle project, and the benefit of having a pickle project is that I can put code into that project that I can then reference from my ASP.NET app, just like any other normal class library. But I can also reference that from a Windows Store app, or from a Windows mobile app, or a Silverlight app, or an Xbox app. So basically, it's a portable class library. I can reference it from pretty much any client platform that's supported by .NET. And I believe the Xamarin guys might be adding support for PCLs at some point in the future.
I think you're right.
I think that would be really, really good, because then you would be able to write one class library that you could access from also your Android applications written in C# or your iOS applications that are written in C#. So that could be pretty cool. That's true write once, run anywhere. I don't like that term very much, but that's kind of what this is. But in this case, I'm really going to be accessing this PCL, which is going to be accessing the mobile service API directly from my ASP.NET page. So what I've got here is I've got the geek list.core. I called it geek list at first. Now we're calling it Kanban list, but it's a geek list. So I've got this API client class in here. Before I dive into that, I want to show you these models. And what I've done in this model class, in these model classes, is basically to create almost like data transfer objects, kind of like you do in Entity Framework. So I've got a status object that represents the status table. I've got a task object that would represent that table, and then I'm going to have a user object that would represent the user table. I can make that uppercase or lowercase. It doesn't really matter. I was just hammering through this code the other day. When we did this demo the first time, we actually used lowercase for everything, so it just kind of stuck. So you could call it whatever you wanted. But the key thing is you have to make the properties and the objects the same name as your tables, right?
Absolutely.
Cool. Were you going to ask a question?
Yeah, actually, it's good that you're showing how you're using strongly typed objects, because in the JavaScript we're using just straight JSON. You know, we don't have any types there in our JavaScript application. But from .NET, we can actually do strongly typed objects. The same thing you could do in a Java application. It really works both ways, because the Mobile Services SDK will handle that conversion from our strongly typed objects to JSON and back and forth behind the scenes for us.
Yeah, it serializes it pretty nicely. What we haven't tried yet, and I'm kind of anxious to try, and after the demo I will try it. I was kind of afraid to do it before the demo because then the demo gods get angry and they crash your demo. But what I was thinking about doing was, instead of passing these strongly typed objects around, using dynamics around. So I basically just create a dynamic object, throw it on the wire, and see if it would work. And that would make it more similar to the JavaScript model. I haven't tried it yet, but maybe it'll work. Keep up with me on Twitter or whatever, and we'll find out if it works later on. What I've got here is this API client class. And just like Chris had it in the JavaScript code, I've got this mobile service client. It's probably the same name as it was in the JavaScript code. And I'm going to pass it the URL, just like Chris did in the JavaScript code. And I'm going to pass it the auth key, exactly like Chris also did in the code. And what I've done here is I've kind of created a generic method. It basically is just a get method. And I'm going to tell it what I expect to get back, so a task, a status, a user, that kind of thing. I want to pass it the name of the table. And I've got an optional parameter here that's my query. That's really, if I want to get my tasks, I can pass in the query there. If I want to get somebody else's task, I can pass in their name instead. So what I've done around this is kind of my helper method, my lazy method, if you will. I've also got these more exposed methods like get statuses, get users, get work items, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just making a call directly out to that get table method, calling that stuff back, and being able to hand it back to the calling code. Let's take a look at that calling code right now, which is pretty much right here in my home controller. I'm going to open this up and then kind of collapse all the methods and just kind of walk through stuff quickly. What I've got here is my index method. And in my index method, I'm actually building an instance of this homepage view model guy, a big MVVM, MVC fan. So I like to make my view models for my MVC actions, just like I do for my phone actions. So what I've got is a homepage view model that has a list of unassigned tasks, a list of statuses, and a list of users. And right here I've got a status view model, and I've kind of got a convenience method here where I can convert a status object over to a status view model so that I can then data bind it in my MVC app. The idea behind that is I've got domain language in my PCL project, and I've got domain language in my web project, and I want to basically keep those separate just to be obsessive. If I scroll down here, there's my work item view model guy. You'll see that I've also got my status view model, another one here, and then the status ID that I'm actually going to assign to. And then right down here at the bottom, I've got a special one that I made up whenever I want to do a reassignment that basically just contains all the pieces of information that I'm going to have to send over to the mobile service to basically reassign a task from me to Chris, because I like to give him work.
Always.
Yeah, always. So what I'll do right here is I'll show you that my index method pretty much is going to go out. It's going to create a new instance of that API client. It's also going to new up an instance of my view model. And then I'm going to do an async call over to my client wrapper that will then reach out and talk to the mobile service to give me back all the stuff. I'm going to iterate over this, and I'm going to basically create two sets of objects. One's a status and one's a user. And then right down here, I'm going to build a list of unassigned tasks and a list of assigned tasks so that I can see I've got to assign stuff to people or not. We know that we're going to be using 1 and higher for our user ID, so I'm just hard coding in 0 there if the task is unassigned. You could probably do something like null it out or something like that if you wanted to do it that way. And then finally, I'm going to iterate over all those out of the view model and then return the view. And in the create work item, I'm kind of doing the same thing. I'm just newing up an instance of that core.task object that I'm going to throw into the mobile service API. I'm going to new up an instance of my API client, and I'm going to just basically redirect back to myself. The idea being every time I make a post, I'm just going to reload the homepage again and just, party. Sorry. New machine, haven't done everything I need to do with it yet. I'm going to go ahead and hit F5 here and run this app. And you're going to see it all pop up. Hopefully it won't have any tasks in it. If it does, that means I'm probably talking to the wrong mobile service, one of our other ones that we were setting up with.
Could be.
And this is actually going to reach out, make a call to that PCL project, which is going to actually then reach out and make a call out to my mobile service API. And what I'll do right here is I'm going to go ahead and leave this task open. I'm going to leave it to unassigned since I don't have any users, and I'm just going to write, go see some jazz. All right, I'm going to save that guy. And what you should see right here is it'll appear in my unassigned tasks right here. So there you go see some jazz. And you saw that once it refreshed, it actually went so fast that it hadn't pulled everything back down again. So I had to hit refresh one more time and make sure that it was in there. If you wanted to, basically do that call on the server side and make sure that you got everything back, maybe do it a second time, or if you wanted to put a sleep in there, just to make sure that once the page loads, it's going to pull all the new data because sometimes it's just going too fast. So you'll see right there's my unassigned task, and I can't really assign it to anybody yet because so far we don't have any users. And I think that's where you're going to kind of step in and take over.
Well, the first thing I want to do, though, is hop over and show them the client, the dev portal, because even though we don't have users yet,
yep.
I can at least see the tasks and maybe even change the status.
Sounds good. Well, this is the admin portal. Now we're going to look at the dev portal.
Now, as you can tell, Brady's a little bit better at making things look nicer than me. I kind of had something that looks a lot like something we saw earlier. But right now, so if I reload this, we'll see that there is indeed the task that Brady created, and it's open. And now I can just go ahead and I'll say this is in process because I'm gonna go see some jazz later, Brady. I promise.
Cool.
All right. So now if I save, it's not actually changing the status though. So I can change these drop downs all I want, but it's not doing anything. Let's look at the code and we'll see how we can actually change it so it actually will change the status. Now my client application uses something called handlebars, which is just kind of a templating system. So then instead of having to build a lot of HTML behind the scenes, I'll have a template in my HTML, which I can then use from the JavaScript to kind of present things pretty nicely. So if you look at the HTML, it's going to be somewhat similar to what we had before. But basically down here, we've got this template, and I've got this unordered list of to-do items. And inside here, I'm going to be able to pass in an array of tasks. And it'll go through, and I've got my list item for each task. It's going to set the ID to whatever the task ID is. It's then going to create a input for the text, and then it's going to do a status drop-down. Right here, it's actually going to handle showing all the statuses I've got, and then selecting the right one. And then down here, kind of the usual stuff, which is just the same JavaScript we had before. Mm-hmm. Now, if I go up to my JavaScript here, again, this right here is the exact same thing as what I had before, and we're still using the same URL you had and the same application key. And down here, I've got my task table, my status table. When I refresh tasks now, the first thing I do is read from my status table. And when I get that data back, I set my local statuses to be the results. And then after that, I read from my task table. Then I create a data object that contains all that data. I pull out that template I have in my source. And then right here is where I'm actually using handlebars to say, take this data and put it in this template. I get this output out of it, and then I use that to set my tasks on the screen. Now right here, I've got some really simple code that's going to allow me to handle actually updating the statuses. Cool. So I'll just go ahead and uncomment this, and we'll walk through it. So first thing we do is we say, wherever we find a status dropdown, which is the class of my dropdowns, whenever they change, go ahead and call an update on the task table. And here we pull out the ID of the specific task, and then here we're getting the value of the status I updated to. Pretty simple.
And the reason for that JavaScript that we've written with the handlebar stuff rather than the default code is to kind of show you that if you want to use handlebars or Angular or insert your own JavaScript framework here that you like to use or one that you've written yourself, you can do that because it's all JavaScript, it's all HTML, and you can pretty much do whatever you want. The only thing we're going to give you is that mobile service client that you can basically call back and forth to, as Chris pointed out already, using JSON data. So you can do whatever you want in the HTML layer.
Absolutely. So as we can see here, we've got that item. We have the status is equal to 1. So let's go ahead and reload our application. We've got it, that it's open. And let's go ahead and say it's in process now. Now if I go back here and I refresh, we should see that the status has changed. Now it's 2. So it's behind the scenes doing that update. It's not refreshing the page. It's just handling it for me.
And if I refresh, mine's going to do the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. If you refresh the portal, you should see that now it's no longer open.
Yep.
Perfect.
Cool.
All right. Do you want to switch over to the slides for us?
Sure.
Great.
And I'm not his boss.
Well, he is assigning me tasks, so we could argue. So what we've got now is we've got an application, a developer portal that I could easily drop into a mobile application, or I could go to view it on my mobile device, or view it from my computer, that's written in HTML5. And we've got our admin portal written in ASP.NET, both talking to the same mobile service, both using the same database, both relatively easy to get set up and use. The next thing we're going to talk about is some server-side logic. So obviously, we're building a website in HTML5 here, and Brady's building one in ASP.NET. We could put logic in both places, but we don't necessarily want to do that, and we shouldn't really have to. So what we've got with mobile services is server-side logic. Just like when we created a table and it created a REST API, it also generates scripts that intercept any request against our table. Now, mobile services is built on top of Node.js, so these are Node-style scripts. By default, right now, all they're doing is passing our requests through the database, but we can customize that. And in addition to just normal JavaScript type stuff, there are a ton of different modules we can use to do different things inside those scripts. You can do stuff like make web requests using the request module, send emails with SendGrid, execute custom SQL statements with MS SQL. You can use Pusher actually to do WebSocket style communication to your website. So we've got push.star for push notifications to mobile apps. But if you want to do something similar with your websites, you can use Pusher to do that.
One of our colleagues actually worked up on his, Nick Harris, actually. He has, was it a .NET Gadgeteer, I believe it was?
I believe so.
He has a .NET Gadgeteer on his wall, just kind of taped to his wall in like true hacker style. And it knows when, I think it's a light sensor or a temperature sensor, I can't remember which one. And that thing will actually make a call out to an API. And he's got a mobile service app that is connected to that API using Pusher. So whenever it updates and it sends information up to Pusher, his mobile app will show basically how hot or cold his room is, or where the light is or whatever. So he's actually wired that up to a microcontroller. So that shows you what you can do with it.
Yeah. And there's a mess of other modules available too. So there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do inside these scripts. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to add some data validation into the server side to make sure that when Brady creates a new task for me, it's enough information that I know what to do. So I'm back here in the portal. I'm in my script table, or I'm in my task table. I'm going to go from browsing over to script. And right here, this is basically the structure of our scripts. Whatever the method is, so in this case, insert, and then the parameters. For inserting, the item is the actual JSON object that's coming across the wire. User right now doesn't have anything in it other than information to tell me that it's not an authenticated user. And then the request is the actual request. Now, inside that, we've got request.execute, which basically just means this request is going straight to the SQL server. We're not going to intercept or do anything with it. If we switch over to the read script really quickly for a second, it's going to look very, very similar. In fact, the only thing that's different is the fact that here we're doing a read, and instead of a JSON object, we've got a query, which ends up being the OData filter that comes across the wire as, what am I querying? So if I go back to the insert script, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, in order for Brady to add any data, it needs to have at least, 5 characters because I need some information. If he just puts ABC, I probably am not going to be able to figure out what he wants me to do. So inside here, I'm going to say if item.text.length is less than 5, I'll request.respond. Status codes. So status codes is a module you can use if you want to return a status code other than the normal. So for an insert, the normal response code is a 201. It was inserted. But I don't want to return a 201 because I want Brady to know this was not actually inserted. So I'll say bad request. And then I'll give him a little message to let him know why.
And I'd love to see this editor because you'll see as he's typing, it's actually doing kind of autocomplete, kind of giving him hints about what's going on. Just want to point out that's not a special control or an applet or anything like that. That's actually a JavaScript editor that's written in HTML. So he's actually sitting there typing. It's got some nice wizardry to it.
Yeah, it might be difficult to see there, but there is a little bit of IntelliSense it gives me, and you'll see some more as we go on and do a few more server-side things. So here we've got, I'm checking the length. If it's not at least 5 characters, I'm going to tell him it was a bad request. Otherwise, I'll just go ahead and execute and send it to the server. Why don't we go ahead and try it out on the admin portal and see what happens when you give me some bad data.
Sounds good. Do that real quick. I'm going to refresh this guy. What I'm going to do here is just go ahead and just type ABCD. Just leave it at that. I'm going to hit save here. And it looks like it went in, but we know for a fact that it didn't go in. And Chris can probably look at the data and show you that the data did not actually get saved into the table.
Yeah, so I don't see any data here now. Did nothing happen?
I have no idea.
Did we get a request that, did it say, did we get anything on the website that said, this didn't work?
I don't think so. We didn't get any kind of an error or anything. What do you think is going to happen on that end?
I don't know. Can you try, can we put a bug breakpoint in? Will it tell us anything?
Sure. Yeah, let me do that. See if I can do that. Do it in the right place here. Let's see here. Index. Great work on them. Okay, I'll just go ahead and hit F5 here.
So the one thing is with this is that if you're not actually inspecting the response and saying, what's going on, you may miss things like this. So we may say, this don't actually work because we're not getting back a valid response.
See here? I didn't get back anything, so I didn't actually look at what I was getting back.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a case in point. So if you're not actually looking at what the response is, you're not going to know it didn't work. But the message I respond with, it's going back to the client. We're just in this case not caring. So you always want to make sure you're inspecting your response to see, am I getting an error? Did that actually go through correctly?
I can probably wire that up real quick. What I could do here is in my create guy, I could basically var this equal to some sort of a new variable. Is that an awaitable? I'm not sure if that's an awaitable. Going off script a little bit here. Okay, I guess I can't do that. It's going to hand back a task. Yeah, I guess I won't do that. Right
so it'll hand back a task. Okay. You can inspect it. You just need to actually, create the task and then inspect what the response is.
Right, which I'm not doing here.
That's fine. Should we head back to the slides then?
Sure.
Great. So now we've got a system where Brady can create tasks and I can change them, but it doesn't really do us any good unless he's the boss and I'm the only employee, and that's just how it works. So next thing we're going to look at is a way of actually identifying our users to say, Brady's going to give Chris one task and someone else a different task. So as far as authentication goes, we've got a few different options for user auth. Mobile services works really well with OAuth with Facebook, Twitter, Google, and Microsoft. So easy, in fact, that in just a few minutes, we'll be able to set up a complete auth system, and then I'll actually be able to know who the user is using the dev portal. In addition to that, once we know who the users are, we can also change the permissions that I showed you briefly earlier for the CRUD operations on the table. As we saw when I created the status table, the default permission level is anybody with the application key. So as long as you're sending that application key over as a header, it's fine. Now, if I push out my JavaScript application, is it going to be very hard for someone to say, pull down that JavaScript file and then look and see what my key is? It's going to be very, very simple. So it's not really safe or secure for me to just put my application key out there and leave that as a security measure. The next level up would be only authenticated users. And in that situation, we have to be sending a valid user token over with each request. And a valid user token is basically something that's generated by mobile services when you authenticate with one of those providers. And it's a token that's signed by our master key. So basically, it's something I shouldn't be able to just fake and send over Brady's user token if I wanted to try to. Conversely, I could set everything to everyone, and then you just need to have access, know my API structure, and you can hit my data. Lastly, I can set it to only scripts and admins, which basically means only a different script can access the data, or somebody with the master key. Now we're going to look at doing only authenticated users and doing the master key in just a moment. Once we do authentication with our users, we also have access to more information on that user object. So right now, the user level that's coming across is anonymous for all the requests. Once I've got an authenticated user, it'll come over as authenticated. If I send over the master key, it'll be admin. And additionally, once I send over a user object, I've actually got a user ID that I can use to basically connect my data to my user.
Cool.
So let's go ahead and do that. So here I am back in my data. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the permissions tab. Inside here, I'm going to go ahead and set this to only authenticated users. And that's going to save. Now let's go ahead and, we'll return to this one. And I'm going to go ahead and refresh this. And again, it's not doing anything. Behind the scenes, I'm getting a 401. I'm not doing anything with my 401, but I'm not able to get the data. This is just what should happen if I make an application and somebody out there discovers what my API is, because I don't want them to get through to my application. They're going to get a 401. They're going to get unauthorized. They're not going to be able to get through. So we're going to go ahead and add some authentication now. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the Twitter dev portal, because I feel like adding Twitter authentication today. So I'm already logged in with an account at the Twitter dev portal. I'm going to go into my applications. I'm going to go say I want to create a new application. when I do this, it needs a bit of information. First, it needs a name and a description, so I'll just call this TechEd Kanban. And I'll use the same thing for description, but I'll paste it twice because it has some character limits, and I want to make sure I meet it. The next thing it needs is the website URL. Now, when you do OAuth with any of these providers, essentially what happens is your application talks to mobile services, which talks to their provider, which talks to your mobile service, back and forth until basically they say you're an authenticated user. Now, once we set up our authentication within mobile services, it's going to basically create those endpoints for us. But Twitter needs to know what website it's going to talk to when I try to authenticate. So down here, I'll say, yes, I agree. And then we'll try to do this.
Does this bug anybody else that it's incredibly difficult to read the CAPTCHA stuff?
I think between all of us, we might be able to get it.
Probably so.
All right, so it created it on the first try, I might add. And we've got a consumer key and secret. Now, all these auth systems work the same way. You give them that information. They give you back a key and a secret. They just might call it a client ID or a client app ID. There's different names for all of them. So we copy the key and secret. We go over to identity. And this is where I'd put the identification settings for any of these providers. So I'll paste in my consumer key and secret. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now, just like when I create a table and it creates that REST API, when I save these authentication settings, it's doing something behind the scenes in the mobile service. So if I go back here and I copy the same URL I gave to Twitter, and I open it up in the browser, this is going to take me to a page that says, hey, your mobile service is up and running. That's basically it. It doesn't really give me anything else. But as we already saw, that if I go to tables/status, and if I pass over the header key, I could get all the data. If I actually sent that to everyone and I did this, I'd actually get a list of the JSON data in my browser. But now, if I go to login/Twitter, it's actually going to take me to the Twitter authentication page. And this is just the same way that our mobile service will do authentication once we add it in. So I'll return back to my application. Actually, I'm going to go to a different version of it. It's a little bit easier, then we can just walk through the code. So now I'm at stage 1. And stage 1, this next version of it basically says, you're not authenticated. I don't have a user record. Let's look at exactly how it does that. On the index.html side of this, everything's pretty much the same, except for we've added a few divs for those login and logout buttons that we're going to see. And down here, excuse me, or up here rather, in the app.js, I've added some more data because I'm going to use users now instead of just statuses and tasks. Excuse me. So the refresh tasks, it's pretty much the same because I'm not going to do anything differently when I pull down my task and status data. It's just the task and status data I have. But now down here, instead of calling refresh to do items at the beginning of the whenever we load, we call refresh off display. And what that's going to do is it's basically going to say, it's basically saying, do we have a user? So we try to pull the user from storage. We're using local storage in this demo because it's really convenient, and most of the HTML5 browsers, or I think nearly all of them, support it. In this case right now, I'm saying, hey, I don't have a user. And basically, when I check this right here, it's going to say, you don't have a user. So then I show that they need to log in. I show the login button, and then basically make the user log in. So if I go back here, I'm going to click login. It's going to pop open a window that's going to give me that Twitter API login. And I'm just going to log in with my account. It hands back and says, hey, here's your Twitter, here's your user ID. So this user ID is coming from mobile services, and it's basically the provider and then whatever the ID number that ties me to, in this case, Twitter. It also hands back behind the scenes a user token, which is that token that's signed by my mobile service with a master key. Now, in this application, once I've done that, I'm also checking to see, once they pull that, is there a record in the user table that matches this user ID? There isn't, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to say, yeah, my name is Chris. So I'll save this record. And it's going to show me right now that there's, it's going to basically give me all the records now. So I've got access to all the data. But I don't really need access to all the data. I just need access to my data. In order to set that up, I'm going to go back to the server-side portal. Get rid of those windows first. I'm going to go into the Data tab. And I'm going to go into my tasks. And I'll browse the data for a second. And I'll say, I've got this assigned to column. Wouldn't it be great if we use the assigned to column to actually say what user has that data, that task? So I can do that, and I can do that on the script side. So in my read function, what I really want to do is I want to say, I'm going to add something to the query.
So it's really like round-trip JavaScript. You got JavaScript on the front end, you got JavaScript on the back end. It's fantastic.
Exactly right. Yeah. Now, this is great. So basically what I'm doing is I'm going to dynamically add a query to whatever comes in, which would work great because now if I save this and I go ahead and go back to my application, I don't see the data because, you know what, that task wasn't assigned to me. But there's one problem I need to handle before I can ask Brady to assign me any task, and that's if he goes and tries to load the task data now, he's not going to see any data either because he's not an authenticated user, and he can't actually access, once he is an authenticated user, if he was, the task wouldn't be assigned to him, so he wouldn't get this back. But fortunately, with the user level, I can change that. So right here, I'm just going to say if the user level equals authenticated, then I want to insert my query. And then after that, we'll just execute the request.
Oh, it auto-closed your if.
Oh, yeah, yes, it did. Thank you. All right. So now basically what I'm saying is if they pass in a user object, so it's the user is authenticated, add the query. If not, execute it. So I'm going to go ahead and save this.
So basically what that's saying is if you're authenticated, give back everything. If you're a specific user, just give back that user's tasks.
But really what it's saying is if you're a specific user, give me back all the tasks that are mine.
Right.
If you're not, execute the request. But go ahead and let's switch over to the admin portal and see what happens now if you try to request the data.
I have a bad feeling about this.
Yeah, that might make sense.
So here's what's going to happen. Since he's already locked that stuff down, whenever I try to make a call out to it, this is kind of what he said was going to happen. We're going to get that 401 unauthorized. That's pretty much what the client is telling us now. So back in my core project, whenever I try and reach out and talk to the API, it's actually going to blow up. It's going to tell me, hey, you shall not pass. So I'm going to have to do some tricky stuff here because I'm not going to allow the users to log in with Twitter and whatnot. What I've got here is I've got this class called Authentication Handler, and that inherits from another class inside the mobile services framework called Delegating Handler. And what this does is it basically just delegates control during the request figures out whether or not you're passing in the Zumo master key, which I'm going to get right here. And Chris already showed you where to get that from the portal. So what I'm going to do in this client, it's pretty simple to add this piece of functionality. I just have to add another parameter here. I have to basically pass it some class that inherits from that delegating handler. So I've got my own authentication handler class that is going to supply my master key right here. You can probably put that master key, this URL, and this key, your auth key. You can probably put that all in your config file. You might want to encrypt it using some sort of encryption and decrypt it in your code if you wanted to. But at this point, now that I've already wired that up, if I run this, I should be able to get back everything. At this point, we'll probably have a user as well. So there we go. So here's my list of unassigned tasks. And now I can take this and I can actually assign that over to Chris. I'm going to tell Chris he should go see some jazz. And you'll see right here that we've actually got a list of users. And if you were to add another user here, you just see another section down here. So what I'll do here is I'll just go ahead and assign this to Chris. Click Save here. And now you'll see that it's already, did it go? Maybe we haven't wired that up yet. Did I jump ahead too far?
No, I think I missed something, actually.
Really?
Yeah, so if we hop over to mine for a second.
Okay.
No, we have it. Oh, yeah, never mind. I'm sorry, we do. All right, so the problem we've got here, maybe. 1 second, Brady.
Oh, I'm here for you, man. I'm here for you, man.
Yeah?
It's okay.
Okay, cool. You're saving the assign to is equal to Chris.
Oh, it's passing that in instead?
Yeah, can you change that to pass over the ID?
Yeah, I can pass over the ID.
So if we look at the data here, we'll see that when Brady saved the task, instead of sending over the assign to ID, like my user ID, he's sending over the, actually, hold on a second.
Okay.
We've actually got 2 problems here.
Okay.
The first problem is that my user object, I don't have any way of tying this user object to my user ID, right? Now, if every time I load the page I said, yeah, my name is Chris, I could look up the data and say, yes, Chris has ID record 1. But that seems like a waste of time. So really what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this data. I'm going to go back to the scripts. And just like how I was able to check the user ID in that read query, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add that here. So now when I go ahead and refresh and I have to create my user account again, instead of just being ID 1 and then Chris, I'm going to have my user ID in here as well. So now if I refresh, saying, hey, you didn't create your account. Let's go ahead and create that now. Now that I've created that, and I go back to browse the data,
Oh, I see.
So now I've got a user ID in here. So now when Brady looks at it, he actually has something that can tie me and my user ID back to the task.
Cool.
So now if we go back to the task, do you want to?
Sure can. You flip back over to me. Could have just left that open. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new task here. Go ahead and save this guy. And then I'll go in. And now I can actually go ahead and select Chris here. I'll click Save. And hopefully his change worked. And there it goes. So we've already assigned that task right there. And if he has another user and I just hit F5 here, we'll see that other user directly in here. Which I guess I'd have to log in first to do that.
Yes, I think you would actually.
Press log in. What's that URL? Kanban?
TechEd Kanban.
TechEd Kanban?
Yep.
What is it, mobile service? I'll just copy it.
Okay.
I'll be lazy.
Fair enough.
And it's /login.
Yes.
Okay. /login Twitter. Always forget.
/login/Twitter.
Okay. Because we have a different login for each individual page. So now I'm going to log in as me. There we go. I'll authorize this app. Oh, it like redirected me or something. Is it going to redirect me? There we go. I'll just click it to continue. It's actually pulling down the JSON for some reason. So if I refresh this now, you should see my user in there. Oh, it just didn't catch it. Oh well, demo gods are not being nice this afternoon.
No, apparently not.
It didn't redirect me back for some reason. So it did you, but it didn't me.
Interesting.
Odd.
All right. Now we've got one other problem, though, and that's that when I pull the task, I'm actually not getting back my data. So what we're going to actually look at is another way of seeing what's going on here. So I've got another application I can use called RunScope. And basically what it allows me to do is I can say, here's my application, and here's the URL, and what's actually going across the wire. So all I have to do here is I'm going to say TechEd Kanban. We'll add that. And now I need the URL of my mobile service, which I can get from right here. Now once I'm here, I'm going to add this URL in here. And basically I'm saying, hey, set up this site so that any request to whatever URL you give me will go through to my mobile service. So I'm going to go over here and just pull out the URL here. Now if I go back to my application, in my app.js, all I need to do here is take my URL and change it to be this one.
This is really helpful during debugging.
It
You
is,
can actually
yeah.
see everything going across the wire.
Absolutely. So now when I do this, all my requests will actually go through them, and then I'll be able to actually look and see exactly what data is going across the wire, and I can kind of figure out why I'm not getting the task data I think I am. So we'll save that. Now if I go back to my application and I do a request again, let me get rid of my breakpoint here. It's going to check and make sure I'm logged in. Okay, so it should have done my request. If I go back over here, great, I've got a ton of requests. So now I've got this request right here, and it's sending over, let's see.
I'll probably just try to authenticate again.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. Let's look at the request, actually. So let's see, I've got my Zumo auth right here. That's weird. It's sending over the Zumo auth, but it's actually not pulling back any data. Let's look at my script again and see if I'm doing anything wrong.
Okay.
So now we can actually look and see how you can debug some of the scripts once you're using them on the server side. So in my task method, what I'm going to do is go into the script. And in here, I'm going to say console.log. Oh, actually, I want to go to the read. I'm sorry, not the read, not the insert. Yep, I'm going to discard my changes. All right, so in here, I can say console.log and then user. So let's see what's actually going on, because this should be working and it just isn't. So let's save that.
Oh, did you go into the tables and enable authentication for each table?
It doesn't. Well, you actually, once you send over the user, it's going to do that automatically.
Okay.
So the table is locked down now.
Okay.
All right. So now if I actually go back to my application, I refresh the data. It's taking a little bit longer because it's actually going through a proxy now. So now when I go back here, I can go to my log tab and actually get a lot of information about what might be going on. So here it says I'm authenticated, and I've got this data where the user ID. So I'm sending over what I think looks right. So I've got it should be showing up as authenticated. It should be showing up as user ID. I'm going to go back to my task table because something doesn't feel right, though. we don't actually have a user ID in the task table, do we, Brady? We have an assigned to column. So maybe the problem is actually right here with my read script, because there's no user ID. So maybe I should just assign to. Let's go ahead and save that. No, we'll try and save that. All right, now that's saved. Now let's go back here. Request my data again. It's taking a second.
There we go.
Now I'm actually getting the data back just like I was hoping I would. And now it's actually pulling it, so I'm only getting my tasks. So you had a few tasks in there, right?
I only had one.
Only one?
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead and add a few more?
Sure, I can do that.
And then we'll just make sure they're there when we go by going here.
And what I'm going to do now is instead of just like doing the creation and then the assignment later on, I'm going to go ahead and assign this to Chris like out of the gate. So I like to give him work. So there's another one.
Enough already.
Let's do one more. Work. So there we go.
Why don't you also create one and just assign it to no one?
Just assign it to no one. I can do that. No one's task. Hopefully that quote won't blow me up. There we go.
All right. So now if we hop back over to my machine.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. So now we can see in the database we've got 5 different records, and we've got 3 records that are assigned to me, and then one that was Chris before because we weren't doing the user ID, and one that has a 0 because he didn't assign it to anyone. So now if I reload this, we should see 3 tasks.
There we go.
Great. So now I've got all my tasks, and I can change their status at will, and I'll let you know they've all been canceled because I'm going on vacation.
Right. That's good
Let's
stuff.
switch back to the slides.
Awesome.
So what we've got now is we've got our client our developer portal in HTML5 that's been secured using Twitter. We've also got our ASP.NET admin portal, which has been secured because it's using the master key. And it's safe to do that from our ASP.NET side because that master key doesn't get pulled down in JavaScript to the client application. It's only there on the server. They're both securely talking to our mobile service, which means that we've also secured access to the data. Now, there's a number of ways we could also extend our site. We could use stuff like using SignalR or Pusher for real-time WebSocket-style communication down to our application. We could also add some authentication to the ASP.NET administration app and create a role-based system if we wanted to. If we had mobile applications, we could really easily send push notifications using the push module. And we could also use stuff like the scheduler for back-end jobs.
That's good.
Yeah. So Windows Azure Mobile Service is a back-end service. With a name, it says mobile, but it's actually very powerful and very accessible from your mobile websites as well. With it, you get access to data storage powered by SQL, user authentication and data authorization, server-side logic with a ton of potential because you have all access to all those modules, push notifications once you have a mobile application, back-end processing with scheduler, scaling really easily, as well as logging and diagnostics. Let's see. As far as additional resources, if you go to www.windowsazure.com/mobile, if you don't do the www, it will just take you to the Windows Azure site for some reason. But if you go there, basically all the tutorials for using mobile services from both the web and mobile applications is there. The link on the right, that aka.ms/common.wams, is basically kind of a compendium of a ton of different resources that will take you through how to do different things for mobile services.
And then we also have the Windows Azure Training Kit, which I think has some mobile services articles in it as well.
Exactly. The Windows Azure Training Kit covers mobile services as well as all the other features of Windows Azure. So basically, if you want to know how to do something with Windows Azure, you can probably figure it out from using the Training Kit. And then as always, you can always reach out to Brady and myself, both on Twitter or our websites, because we're always happy to help people with the web and with mobile services. I don't know why I keep pointing at that TV. It's not like the computer's there.
Awesome.
So there's some further resources about, let's see, MSDN, TechNet, Channel 9, stuff like that. All the sessions will be on Channel 9, I believe. Then also fill out your evaluations. I think people win stuff, and it's always good to hear what you guys think about the session. And I think this last slide, I don't think that's going to work because I think that that tag should have been replaced. So I'll just go back to I'll go to this one.
Cool.
Great.
Well, does anybody have any questions about anything that we've shown right here? One other thing that I want to point out is what we showed you today with the ASP.NET accessing the mobile service. That was actually something that we got from the engineering team internally. but what they actually gave us was an internal NuGet package that we just referenced locally on our computer. That NuGet package is going to be online very soon. So I want to point out that you'll be able to actually do install package, Windows Azure Mobile Services, and that'll actually pull down the NuGet package and give you the ability to do everything that I've shown you right here. And you'll be able to do that from ASP.NET, from a Pickle project, so that you'll be able to do it from a phone app if you want to custom without having to download the project from the site. You'll be able to do pretty much whatever you want. So you could even write it to like ping your mobile service from the cloud if you wanted to. So
that's great.
At this point, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the mic if possible, so we get your question on air.
Several mics, I think.
Yes, yes.
Enough for everyone.
Okay. I had a question about using the JavaScript in JSON. Are you required to use it, or can you go end-to-end in C#?
So the question was as far as if you're required to use JSON with a JavaScript. So as I understood it, so under the wire, everything is JSON that goes back and forth with the REST API. But as Brady showed you, Brady didn't do any JSON himself. It's handled by the Mobile Services SDK, depending on what sort of project you're building. So if you're doing something in C#, which is the SDK he used, then you'd handle C# in your application, and you never really see JSON. But it's going to convert, it's going to serialize and deserialize that to JSON for you.
Now, what you were asking is when you're typing the code into the portal, were you asking if that's ever going to be C# or JavaScript, or?
Obviously, we need HTML, and can it be end-to-end the rest of it C# for?
Okay. Okay.
So I'm sorry.
I didn't quite hear you.
Okay. So obviously, we need HTML, and then for the rest of everything we build, there will be the little bit of JavaScript in the middle. That's just what I'm asking. That's the requirement to go through for the serialization part.
Right.
It can't just be .NET all the
way.
Right.
It's not like a remoting kind of thing. It's always going to be JSON on the wire.
Okay.
The question that we typically get is in that thing where he was typing the code in the portal in JavaScript. One of the questions that we get frequently is, will we ever be able to do C# in that area?
Yeah.
We don't know yet. Right now, it looks like it's going to be JavaScript for the foreseeable future. You wouldn't actually be able to do C# on that side at all. So,
okay. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. I'd like to know compare and contrast Web API to mobile services, and when would be the right scenario, right time to use one versus the other?
Cool. I love that question.
Well, yeah. To read the question was to compare and contrast Web API with mobile services. And as Brady has some experience with mobile services and has a vast amount of experience with Web API, I'm just going to let him handle this one.
That's fine. Chris is kind of the mobile services guy. I'm kind of the ASP.NET guy on the team. Actually, John Galloway is really the ASP.NET guy on the team. But I work a lot with Web API. I'll be doing a Web API talk tomorrow. And in that talk, I'm actually going to be showing you how to do Web API to like a phone or a Windows 8 app. It's not really one of those things that's like an either or. My kind of kindergarten answer for that would be if you want to get started and like get done really, really, really quickly and you don't want to have to write the API yourself, you'd probably want to start with mobile services. And if you're going to have to target multiple devices and you want to be able to get like boilerplate code to get you started, mobile services would be a really good place to start. If you want like uber control, and maybe you don't like the idea of doing JavaScript on the server, you're like pure C#, then I would probably recommend that you go with Web API. You're also going to have a little bit more capability if you're doing things like attribute routing and being able to like target things individually. But one thing that this has that is coming to Web API is all the stuff where you can do authentication on the wire. That's actually one of the things that I'm going to show tomorrow. That's one of the new things in the new release of Web API is that we're going to be able to do things like rather than have to just use cookies, you'll be able to actually authenticate like on the JSON wire. So that'll be good. Pardon me? Let me look.
Well,
next question.
While Brady's looking that up, though, one thing I'll add to that is that when you create a mobile service and it creates that database behind the scenes, that is a full-blown database in mobile services. So if you start today using mobile services and you decide, I want feature XYZ when using Web API, that Web API can talk to the same database. Mm-hmm. If you eventually, grow beyond what you want to do with mobile services, you can do, websites, you can do cloud services, you can do VMs, all talking to that same database. Mm-hmm. You don't have to worry about, now I have to take my data out of this system and put it in some other system. Right. It's a database. You can do what you want with it.
It's at 245, by the way. And just to kind of give you an idea, sort of, on point to what he's saying, if I was going to do this with Web API, I would have to. And I'm a little obsessive about it, so I wouldn't just start with a web project. I would start with a core project and maybe a DAO project and that kind of thing. I would have to build an entity framework layer, then generate my database, then write my controllers on top of that, or I could just generate the controllers from the the automated tools. But with this, you kind of don't have to do that. You just party. So,
okay, thank you.
Do you have a question? Thank you so much.
So you used Twitter for authentication. Do you have an example with ADFS?
Not in mobile
To
service.
create
was
token
AD?
for the web services?
Right. but
Like
that-
an active token?
I think the question was, can you do authentication with ADFS through mobile services?
Yeah, but using a active authentication,
Right.
not passive.
I don't know.
Yeah, so with mobile services, there's the question was around what kind of authentication options are there beyond the provider. So there are the built-in providers with mobile services for authentication. Beyond that, you can do custom auth, or you can do basically, if you wanted to, you could basically send up your credentials to like a login table, which is basically be like a virtual table used just for the methods, the server-side methods. Inside that, you could then, send that data over to whatever service you want to authenticate with, if that's a possibility. There's also a partner that we have called Auth0, and I know there's going to be a demonstration of them later today at 3:15. Okay. And they allow you to, with mobile services, also to connect to stuff like AD and I think some other custom authentication options.
But if you needed to get down and dirty and do that, you could always use the C# API, or the SDK, I guess is the right term. You could use the C# SDK, glue that to your AD provider, and then do your calls there. But that's probably a lot of plumbing you might not want to have to worry about. But we should probably find that out if we're going to support AD on that. That'd be good. Thank you for the question.
Hi, I had a quick question. If you support more than one provider, so let's say you have Twitter and a couple of other options, then you would have that many master keys. How does that
So the question was around, can you support multiple providers? The answer to that is you only need one mobile service for as many applications as you want to connect to that mobile service. So if you've got a Windows Store app, an Android app, an iOS app, you can use one mobile service. You only have one master key, but you'd only have one master key, but you can use any of the authentication providers you want. So today I only showed Twitter. I could use Twitter and Facebook and Google and Microsoft in a single app if I wanted to show the users that they have all those options. Is that your question?
So Twitter gave you a master key, right? But
Twitter gave me a consumer secret that identified my app to them.
Right. And so would Facebook. That's kind of an OAuth thing.
So would you store both of their keys then? How would you know that?
Yeah, so basically, do you want to switch me over to mine
sure.
quickly? Yeah, so basically, today I just added Twitter authentication. All I need to do is I can go to the Facebook developer portal. I give them the same information, my URL. They give me back what they call the app ID and the app secret. I put that in here too, and then my application supports both Facebook and Twitter. And all I have to do from my client side is maybe present some UI that says, here's a Facebook button, here's a Twitter button. If they call Facebook if they hit the Facebook button instead of Twitter, I would, instead of doing Twitter, I'd just say Facebook. So you can support all the providers, in one single mobile service by just putting all the keys and secrets into here.
Mm-hmm.
So the methods going after this, how would they all know that? This is only for the authentication of the user, or afterwards?
So this piece right here is only to authenticate the users.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But now, Brady could be a user too, and I would just have to make some role management system where Brady is a user who's an admin, I'm a user that's a developer.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you.
What's that? Live? Yeah. So basically, the Microsoft account setting that is live now. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Great. Well, yeah.
The question is, when are we going to go live with it rather than preview?
Sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
That's the best I can tell you right now.
Yeah. Extremely soon. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't give you a better answer than that.
Yeah. Anything else? All right. Well, what's that? Yeah. So the question was about the scaling options, and sorry we didn't get more into this, but basically, as far as your mobile services go, you start off in free mode or shared mode, so you're on a shared VM. Once you go up to reserved, it gives you a big warning that says this will cost you money, so you don't accidentally do it. And then once you are on a reserved VM, you can then upgrade the number of instances, and you can do the same thing with the SQL server and the database you're running on. You can upgrade it to the size, and you can make it the only database on that server.
Mm-hmm. Since this sits on top of websites, it has some of the same scaling options that websites has.
Right.
So.
Great.
Awesome.
Well, thanks everybody for coming and sticking around for questions. Appreciate it. And
thanks a lot.
Please reach out to us if you have any more.
Take care.